Hello and welcome to another edition of Critical Q&A, the show where I answer your questions based on what you've left for me in the comments section of my Q&A videos or have sent to me by email at askchrisshelton@gmail.com. Got some great questions this week and we're going to take those up. I wanted to note that if you guys haven't checked out my Deconstructing Scientology series, this is going to be a fairly long series of videos taking apart the book Scientology, which is a bit of academic apologist work. So it's been kind of interesting so far. And I'm hoping that the whole thing isn't as bad as the first two chapters were. But, you know, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. The whole survey of a bunch of different academics and their write-ups and essays about Scientology. So, you know, so far, so the first two have been really, really missing the mark. But, you know, we'll see what else has to come from that. And also, if you haven't checked out, you know, if you're into movies at all, check out my movie reviews. I'm having a lot of fun doing those too. So let's get to your questions. Nick C. Listening to Lawrence Woodcraft's account of his life as a Scientologist, I noticed that Scientology had to do a serious run around the immigration rules to get him to come to Clearwater from his native England and stay there. Elsewhere, Jason Begay stated that on several occasions his calls to Clearwater had been answered by people who seemed to have limited command of the English language and accents that he thought to be Eastern European. It is also widely known that Mike Rinder is from Australia and Hannah Eltringham Whitfield is from South Africa. So if we assume that the Eastern Europeans encountered by Begay, along with the Australians, Brits, and South Africans he didn't peg as such, had to jump through the same hoops Lawrence Woodcraft did, it would appear that there are at least a few people in the Sea Org who, due to the Sea Org's policies, are technically in violation of immigration rules, as is the Sea Org itself. Hence, a three-part question. A, have you encountered non-US Sea Org personnel during your time as a Scientologist? And if so, how often? B, has Scientology ever butted heads with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, over the status of Sea Org members who are not US citizens or permanent residents? And C, how likely, in your opinion, is this kind of head-butting to happen in the near future? All right, so immigration and the Sea Org and Scientology. You know, I did a whole podcast this week on the subject of immigration, my Sensibly Speaking podcast. And so I'm kind of all, you know, boned up on the subject of immigration. And there's a lot to know about the topic, right? And it's not necessarily the case that, you know, the immigration rules for coming into the United States make a lot of sense or really are the way that they should be. So I will say that. But certainly no defense of Scientology, who routinely will do a runaround. But I first want to make it clear that it's not just in the area of immigration that Scientologists, or Sea Org members especially, will try to do a runaround of the law. They'll do that with anything that they think is getting in their way, because the Sea Org considers its mission and purpose senior to anything going on in the world. There isn't anything, any law, any rule, anything, any person that's more important as far as a Sea Org member is concerned than the Sea Org's mission. And so they don't care about what they call WOG law, right? These pesky rules and details and visas and you know, citizenship papers and all this other stuff. They don't care about any of that. Or they don't care about it any farther than they need to in order to get whatever product or thing it is that they're trying to achieve or get. So if they're trying to bring somebody over from Europe, let's say, well, let's break this down into your questions. So first you say, have you encountered any non-US Sea Org personnel? Yeah, of course I did. I worked in the Sea Organization for 17 years in Los Angeles. I met Italians, French, Germans, Austrians, Hungarians, English, Romanians, Russians. I mean, yeah, I met people from all over the world. Plenty of Australians, plenty of Canadians, New Zealanders, Mexicans, you know, people from Peruvians, Argentinians. I met all of those kinds of nationalities in Scientology and in the Sea Org. So yeah, and then has Scientology ever butted heads with ICE over the status of Sea Org members? Yeah, yeah, they have, definitely. And here's how that works. Scientology, or the Sea Org rather, will bring people into the country on R1 visas, religious worker visas. And I'm not an expert on religious worker visas. That wasn't my job. It wasn't anything I ever had to directly deal with. It was something I observed happening. So I can only talk about it to the degree that I saw what happened. There were other people in the Sea Org, the people who were over personnel, who were very educated on the subject and knew all the ins and outs and knew how to go down to the immigration office and get the R1 visas, and they knew what to say and how to say it, and they had forms and everything. They knew all the forms to fill out, and they had worked this whole thing out so that people could come from Mexico or from Europe, Russia, Hungary, whatever. And what I observed is the rules called for, R1 visas were not permanent citizenship situations, right? So people would come over on these, and they were only supposed to be here as religious workers for X amount of time, or or they had to be doing X kind of job, and they couldn't be transferred around from place to place and that sort of thing. When the R1 visa would run out, then the person had to be sent back to their country, and then another R1 visa gotten, or something else had to be worked out. And there were plenty of times where I saw that the person had overextended, or there were troubles with the visa situation and this kind of thing. And it was only when it became a real problem, when the authorities were going to start, making noise about it or something, that action would actually be taken. And that's what I saw happen with that. It was always sort of, basically the attitude was, do the minimum that you have to in order to comply with whatever laws you have to comply with in order to get the guy here so that he can be a Sea Org member and do the job that needed to be done. And then C, how likely, in your opinion, is this kind of headbutting to happen in the near future? Well, I have no reason to believe that the Sea Org or Scientology has changed their tune at all. They're still bringing people over from Russia into Clearwater. They're still bringing people, I'm sure, from Central and South America into Los Angeles, for work in the at the PAC base at the big blue buildings, or people from Eastern, Europe or Western Europe. So that's what I observed on that, right? Is basically the attitude of skirt the law, get away with, doing as little as possible for as much as you can get. And then when their feet are held to the fire, then they'll send the person back to their country of origin or to another place like England or something. They'll transfer them over there, and then the guy's not here anymore. And I wish I was one of those personnel people so I could answer more specifically how this kind of thing happens. Also, there's an interview I did with Shane Waitman, who grew up in France and England, and is an ex-Scientologist, and I did a series with him. And he describes in our interviews how he was sent for training from England to Clearwater, Florida, and how he had to lie to the immigration authorities and that sort of thing in order to get the visa to come over and study. And, he was drilled on what to say and how to say it and that sort of thing. So you can watch that interview as well to see what Shane's experience was directly with that. Covert White Rabbit, I have an odd question. You have said, and Scientology has said, that the RPF and/or the whole was voluntary. Has anyone, to the best of your knowledge, ever politely declined or flat out refused to go? If so, what was the result? Were they eventually broken down so they recanted their decision, or did they get some sort of sanction, i.e. extra courses, having to hand out booklets, etc., or were they booted straight to the curb? Any insight you can give will help. Thank you for your answer. Okay, as I've mentioned, the whole and the RPF are two very different things, and this is actually a crucial difference with this. The whole is a place at the international base that has been talked about, the double-wide trailers and all that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. That is a place that David Miscavige just verbally orders people to go to, and they go. And there's no like questioning of those orders or anything like that. If you're going to be at the int base and you're going to be under David Miscavige and he orders you to go into the hole, then that's what you're going to do. Now, if you want to leave the Sea Org in order to get out of that, well, you can say, I want to leave the Sea Org, and then they'll, put you through the little procedure that they do to kick you out of the Sea Org, and that takes months or even over a year. So that is the hole. It's sort of like this horrible place where people are sent and do these mind control nonsense games and basically live at David Miscavige's whim while they execute their punishments, right? But a point about the hole is that, from what I understand, is that when a person is sent there, or many of the people who were sent there, are under what's called a conditional declare or a conditional SP declare. They're suppressive persons. So if they probably think that if they leave, that they're leaving all of Scientology forever. All their friends, the wife, spouses, family, all of it. Because they're going to be declared a suppressive person if they say, I want to go. So that is held over them as a control factor. So yeah, it's voluntary in that they don't have to stay. It's not, they could say, I want to leave the Sea Org now. I want to go. I want to get out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. And then they can either do like what Mike Rinder did or like Mark Headley did and just escape, or they can follow the procedures like Jeff Hawkins did and be what's called routed out, where they follow the procedures. That's how I left the Sea Org, right? Not from the hole, but that's how I left, as I said, look, I want to leave. And they made me go through this, 9-month procedure before they'd let me go. But when you do it that way, you're still, generally speaking, you're still in good standing with the church. But in the case of the guys who are, conditionally declared suppressive, I'm pretty sure they think that if they said they wanted to go, that they would be, declared SPs. And that means no more contact and all the rest. Okay. The RPF, a big difference between that whole situation with the hole and the RPF is that the RPF is a very specific program. And it's got a very specific series of steps that you do. And the first step, the very first thing you do when you land on the RPF, if you're sent there, is you have to sign waivers, a whole series of them. And the Church of Scientology is really big on legal documents and contracts and waivers. And you have to, and if you're going to do the RPF program, then they're going to make you sign waivers saying you are doing it voluntarily. You are doing this of your own free will. They lay out, it's a very difficult program. It's physical hardship. There's, sequestering from the rest of the Sea Org. Like they lay it all out, and you sign that you are doing this of your own volition, okay? The whole, they don't do that. You're just sent there. But the RPF, because it's this whole stringent program, and because there have been legal problems, and because there have been PR problems, they've laid these contracts out to make it ultra clear that it's voluntary. You have to agree to do it before you do it. Now, my issue, one of my big issues with it, of course, is you don't necessarily know what you're agreeing to fully when you sign these papers and proceed into this program. And of course, for somebody to be in a situation where they're going to willingly sign these papers, their head has to already be so far up their, rear end that, that there are very legitimate questions as to whether this is or isn't a voluntary thing. Okay, now, the other thing about the RPF, though, is that there have been people, I know, who have been given the ultimatum that they either do the RPF or they are going to be kicked out of the Sea Org and declared suppressive. And I know that happened in at least 3 or 4 cases that I know of personally, that I saw with my own 2 eyes. I'm sure there are many, many, many more examples. So that's really a choice that's no choice as far as a Scientologist is concerned. From out here in the real world, you might look at this and go, well, good, declare me, no big deal. But, when you're in the mindset, that is a big deal because now you're disconnected and all the rest. So I did see that occur as a method of coercion to get the person to agree to do the RPF. The other thing that I saw, though, when I was on the RPF, is there was a man who was assigned to do the RPF. He was ordered to go do it. He didn't want to do it, and he was bucking it. Now he was not a top-ranking executive. He was just a supervisor from the same place that I had come from, the Advanced Org of Los Angeles, AOLA. So he shows up and he's like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this or not. And he wasn't signing those waivers right away, but there he was on the RPF. So he was given time to check it out. And he spent 3 days doing the program, mustering and doing the breakfast and the lunch and the 20 minutes for food and the running around and all that. And he looked around at all this and he went, no, I'm not doing this. Forget it. No. And he got his walk-in papers and he left the Sea Org rather than do the RPF. And so, kudos to him. That was probably one of the sanest things I ever saw anybody do in the Sea Org. And he, and I don't think he ever had anything to do with Scientology after that. Actually, I never saw or heard of him again. So, so he actually had a pretty level head on his shoulders, right? Most of the people who end up at the gateway to the RPF feel so beaten down and so bad about, the horrible things they did to arrive there in the first place that they sign the papers, they don't even read them, and they just do the program and feel that they're lucky for being given an opportunity to do so. So there's a lot of psychology and a lot of, sociology and stuff going on with the group and the pressure and the peer pressure and the various things that make it pretty questionable as to how voluntary it is. But strictly speaking, if you can keep a level head during the whole process, you don't have to do it. And you can, you do have options. So, so there's that. Now, once you're in the RPF, it's a whole different thing. Once you sign those papers and you're in. And getting out is a months long process, and it's not good. So there you go. Barbara Miller. Chris, I have never understood the clay thing. What is the purpose of doing all those hours playing with clay? I don't get it. Okay, what you're referring to are clay demonstrations. And in Scientology's study methodology, or what's called the study technology, there are 3 things that Hubbard says are barriers to study. Things that get in your way to being able to fully understand or grasp what it is that you're studying. One of those is the misunderstood word. One of those is a lack of mass, which is what the clay thing is about. And one of those is what's called the skipped gradient, where you try to take on, too much too fast. You're at first grade and they throw you into 5th grade. That's a skipped gradient. There's a gradation or a series of steps you're supposed to do. 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. And if you go from 1st grade to 3rd grade, that's a skipped gradient. You skip the 2nd grade, right? So that can be a problem. With the lack of mass, basically the idea is that you can read the words on a page, but if you don't see or feel or touch or somehow experience the thing that the materials are talking about, then that can create problems with your ability to actually understand the thing fully. If you were to read, for example, a book all about animals, and there was no pictures of animals, there were no photographs, there was no films, there was no videos, and you had never seen any of these animals before. Let's say I gave you a book on Martian biology, right? Let's say there's a bunch of animals up on Mars. You've never seen them, you've never heard them, you don't know anything about them. And now I'm going to give you a, zoology book about these animals, but the book is only words. There's no pictures, there's no nothing. That would create a problem for you in actually being able to totally grok what all these animals are like because they're only being described to you, right? This is the idea of it. And I, as you can see, I think that there's something to this, okay? You know, if you're going to describe to somebody how to build a house, it would be a pretty good idea to have some diagrams and charts and things to show you how to do it, right? IKEA instructions are nothing but graphic demonstrations of how to do something. So there is something to our ability to understand or grasp something more completely if we can see it or sense it in some way other than just reading about it. So the idea in Scientology study, when you're in a classroom and you're reading Hubbard's works and he's talking about things, Hubbard talks about a lot of things in Scientology that are insubstantial. A mind, a spirit, various mechanisms that exist in the mind that work on a person, you know, in non-optimum ways. It might all be made up, but he's describing these things in such a way that they sound very real. These various mechanisms and things that your mind does, right? Mental image pictures and data banks of these things and the way the pictures, you know, come in on you and all this. Okay, you can't see any of this stuff. You can't feel it, so you need diagrams, you need pictures, but sometimes those diagrams and pictures are not enough. And also, according to the theory of the study technology, if you can be told about something, if you can learn about something, and then you can show it in 3 dimensions, if you can, draw a picture of it in 3 dimensions, or you can somehow show it to another person, then it shows that you really understand it. Whereas if you can't do that, there's probably something about it that you haven't quite fully understood. So the idea with the clay is you take the clay and you mold it into the thing that it is that you're studying about. Or you somehow mold it into a series of steps that show or demonstrate the concept that you are talking about. For example, if you were going to do a clay demonstration of somebody, I don't know, let's say going down the emotional, tone scale of Scientology, where they go from happy to sad to, totally apathetic, okay? You could say, well, they're happy and then they get sad and then they get apathetic. Or you could mold a person being happy and then a little arrow and, maybe show them getting conked on the head or something, and then mold another body showing that guy, and now he looks sad. You put a little sad face on him. And then, you show him getting conked on the head again, another little arrow, and then they show him, mold another body out of clay, and he's laying there, and there he is, having gone from good to bad to worse, okay? And you're showing or demonstrating a concept. And that is what a clay demo is about. All of that was not actually invented by L. Ron Hubbard. It was invented, these things were worked out and invented by others. Specifically, all this study technology stuff was invented by 2 teachers who happened to be Scientologists. And they presented this work to L. Ron Hubbard in the mid-60s, and he took it and claimed it as his own and got rid of them. And they were, within a couple years, they were declared suppressive. And they weren't around in Scientology anymore, but the study tech was, because Hubbard said it was all his own invention. So, there is that. Ron blubbered. Big fan of your videos. Thanks for sharing so much about your personal experiences. I was wondering, how did L. Ron say he learned about Xenu? I can understand how Scientologists could believe that he came up with techniques to overcome personal issues, but I can't understand how they could believe that he had knowledge of something that explained in so much detail events that happened 1 billion years ago. Yeah, this is a real interesting one, because Hubbard never did explain how it was that he came up with this. And what he did was he talked about how he did research, and everybody knew that when he was on his ship, in 1967, that he had a room he would go into, and I think I talked about this a few episodes ago, where he would just go in the room and turn on his meter and sort of sit there and mentally, cogitate on things. But that was how he did his research. So really, he just dreamed this stuff up. That's how he did it. But Scientologists believe that Hubbard was so good at his ability to audit himself, right, to do Scientology to himself, and through those procedures that he was able to do research by recalling things that had happened way back, millions and millions and trillions of years ago, and applying procedures to himself that he had formulated, various procedures, various questions that he would ask himself, and various things he would do with the e-meter and look at the needle and see what it was doing in response to the questions. And that led him somehow to uncover this horrible trap that nobody else had ever, been able to uncover. And because Hubbard was so amazing and such a genius and so supercharged as a spiritual being, right? He was so amazing that somehow he was able to overcome what nobody else was able to do. And Scientologists believe this, and they really don't ask too many more questions than that. There is an issue called Keeping Scientology Working, where Hubbard specifically says, we will not, get into how it was that I came to rise above the bank, right? The bank being all the sordid, horrible stuff in your mind. He said, yeah, we won't get into answering that question as to how I did it. Let's just be happy that I did, right? And it's all brushed off. It's totally brushed off. There's never an answer given as to how it was that L. Ron Hubbard, out of all the people in the universe, was somehow able to overcome these spiritual and mental traps that nobody else could. And Scientologists just pretty much don't go there and thank their lucky stars that he was as brilliant as he was. Flash answers have arrived. Inquisitor 6321. Chris, have you been officially declared a suppressive by the Church of Scientology? Why, yes, I have. I've never received the suppressive person declare issue. It's usually typed up on a yellow or goldenrod piece of paper. They won't give it to me. They said it's on file in Los Angeles, but I have been told by people who would know that I am declared officially. Scott Summerer. Chris, I enjoy your posts and look forward to each new episode. You do a superb job presenting your views and you articulate your points very well. One question you might be able to answer. What has become of Mark Bunker? Specifically, his documentary Knowledge Report. Mark posted regularly, but as of late, I don't see much, nor do I hear anything at all of his film. Keep up the great work. Thank you very much, Scott. I really appreciate that. As far as Mark Bunker goes, I wish I knew. He, I know fairly recently, was I think months ago, maybe half a year ago or something, if I'm remembering right. He was in the hospital for something, but I know that that's been resolved as far as I know. And he said he was doing a GoFundMe to come up with the last funds needed in order to finish the editing and post-production of his documentary. And we're all still waiting for it. And I would like nothing more than for him to finally finish that work and get it out there, because I'm sure there's some really good stuff in there. So I don't know, other than money problems, what the issue is with him. I'm not in personal touch with him, so that's all I can really say. Lee Jackson. Has there been a fairly recent report on the condition and whereabouts of Miscavige's wife? Nope. There is no new information at all. We have what the best line we have is the sources that fed Tony Ortega on the underground bunker. And as far as I know, that is the one and only place where we're getting any information about Shelly Miscavige at all. And that information is at this point, last real tangible report on her was from when Leah Ramini filed the missing persons report and got word back from the LAPD that she was alive and well. And that's all we got. Laura Soros. You always seem to wear t-shirts with interesting slogans. For instance, in the video I'm leaving this comment on, you are wearing a black t-shirt with white letters that says, "Think, it's not illegal yet." Do you make an effort to find t-shirts with ideas or slogans that hopefully provoke critical thinking, but in a subtle way that doesn't treat your audience like morons or ranting about how stupid people are and need to get on board? Yes, that is exactly what I do. I like t-shirts. I like funny t-shirts, and I like t-shirts that just throw out critical thinking type sentiments. And so those are the t-shirts that I look for and that I buy, or in a couple cases that I've made myself, like the one that says "Got Logic," that's kind of a humorous thing on Got Milk, it's Got Logic. And another one that says, "Reason, use it or lose it." And I think another one, "Your lack of logic, I find your lack of logic disturbing." I think that was a Darth Vader euphemism. So anyway, I came up with a few of my own, but yeah, I'm always on the lookout for t-shirts with good messages on them, or funny, humorous, critical thinking type anecdotes, because I hate ties. I wore a collar and tie for decades, and if I never have to put on a tie again for the rest of my life, I'll be okay with that. Okay, and so we've come to the end of another episode. Thanks for sticking all the way through with me. I hope you found this educational and informative and entertaining at the same time. If you like what I'm doing and you think I should be supported in this work, this channel is entirely fan-funded, so don't hesitate to throw me some love, either using my PayPal button or think about becoming part of my Patreon campaign. It's an ongoing thing, and that is really what keeps me alive and well and being able to do this work. So for those who are supporting me on that, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming around, and I'll see you guys next week.